there's a lot of issues here, and we have some time to debate them. You said, Patrick, that this is about Facebook's role in the world. This is about the future of journalism, and it's also about common interests. On the other side of those words are, of course, the topic of transparency, the issue of power, who has the power and who is accountable for power. And it is, even though we like to talk about ethics here, it's also about business models. Where does the money go? But before we get into that, I want to ask you, Patrick, and thank you for sharing your perspectives. And you know that you're in a room full of editors. I just want to know, and I have to ask you this, when the alarm goes off at Facebook, because you hear that somebody's been posting a picture up in Norway, and there's this editor that's going viral, and he's actually on CNN live when he tells them that actually the Prime Minister of Norway has been censored from Facebook. What happens inside Facebook in a moment like this? What is the process? Who's involved? Is it machines, robots, people? Can you just let us behind the curtain for a second?
Well, as I said, there are millions of flags every day, and it's not, to be clear, algorithms or robots that are flagging content. It is people. People all over the world that care about what their family sees, about what their children sees, things they might find offensive. And we're talking about a photo of a naked child. And that photo had been taken down before. We hadn't had that response. And so actually the conversation, based on the responses we started to see, well before some of those things you mentioned, started a discussion internally. And there are teams of people on our content and policy operations team. They speak 40 languages, they're in different parts of the world, and they have people as well they report to. And it was a very robust discussion. In fact, the policy was reversed for good reason. Imagine that it was not a historical photo. Imagine that it was a non-Pulitzer Prize winning photo of a naked child in distress, a photo taken without her consent. You would praise us for that being taken down, no matter who you are, even the Prime Minister, because that photo shouldn't be on Facebook. It shouldn't be anywhere. And so when we confront these things, and it does happen occasionally, and these are occasional cases out of millions of flags every day, you know, we do take a look at it, and we do have teams that get together and consider these. Now, we appreciate as well that context is important. Cultural significance is important. And this is exactly why I'm here. We said on October 21st, we're going to open ourselves up for more discussion, more dialogue with journalists, with publishers, with governments, with law enforcement organizations, to figure out how best to react to that context. But it's context, right? And we are really meant to connect people with ideas and keep them safe. And that's what our focus is. And that's why I'm here, because we don't actually have the answer of the best way to do it, but we want to find the answer.
So let's elaborate on that, because next time this happens, because at some level it will happen again. Not the exact thing, but a different thing. Then you're looking at these words: newsworthy, significant, important to the public interest, to override your community rules. What will be different next time?
Well, this was actually a very good example of that, a discussion taking place. What will be different is the rapidity with which we react. The ways in which we can respond quickly to these circumstances. And actually, a lot of the work that I do and my team does is communicate and work with journalists, with editors, with news organizations. In fact, there was a conversation that took place between the newspaper and our team. It's just an acceleration of that process, making sure that we can be mindful of who we're working with and the circumstances, and also the seriousness of the issue. We'd rather keep something off that we're unsure about than to put it up to proactively imagining, again, that we get it wrong. There are real people's lives at stake. People can seriously get hurt. People's families can be affected, children and everything. So, you know, these are serious topics, but the process, and what we're saying is the process is one that we want to engage with you with. There's no actual silver bullet to solve this problem.
Sure.
And we're open to that discussion.
Just let me jump in, because then you say we have people here. There's people with these words evaluating content in a context. And when Espen Egil says that's editorship, how can you still say that you're not an editor when that's actually what you do, and it's exactly what the rest of them do? That's a part one of the question. The other one is, when the whole editorial world says we perceive you as a media company, we perceive Mark Zuckerberg, of course it's a symbol, but still as the chief editor of the world in a way. Isn't that actually changing the whole thing, that even though you perceive yourself as a startup tech company from Silicon Valley, actually you just became a media company? Congratulations, you're one of us.
No, not really. I mean, look, the company's been around for 12 years. It started off as a site for people to share in universities. And, you know, an interesting story that Chris Cox, our Chief Product Officer, tells is, you know, when they launched Newsfeed 10 years ago, they thought they had it right. They thought they'd figured it out, this would be really interesting for people. And they had the next day a group of 1 million people, a group on Facebook called Students Against Facebook, and Facebook Newsfeed. 1 million out of 10 million total users of the platform. That was 1/10 of our user base. We realized that we needed to reach out, we needed to communicate more with our user base, and we needed to figure out ways to make changes that were acceptable as well in working with our community. And we've grown as a business, we've grown as a network, a place where people can share. And our mission is really to connect the world and make it more open. But at the same time, we do realize that people get a lot of information and news via Facebook. And that, our role in the news ecosystem, we take extremely seriously. But our role is to really to make sure that we allow for that free-flowing information. I think everybody agrees with that. We also need to protect people. We need to protect children, we need to protect women, we need to protect people in certain countries that don't have the same liberal views as other countries. And I don't think anyone disagrees with that either. So we have to find a way for those two things to work together, and that's where we have the community standards, which provide an outer framework to allow us to make these decisions as and when they occur. So the editors are you, and I say you in two ways. You, the editors of the newspapers, magazines, journals, broadcast networks, and you as personal individuals, as citizens, who choose every day what you want to see and what you don't want to see based on the preferences that you make, the friends you connect with, the friends you unfriend, the news organizations that you follow, the journalists that you like. You are empowered to be an editor of your own news source. Do you know how many pieces of news you would have, or how many posts in your newsfeed, if there was no algorithm to help shape a feed that is meant for you based on your preferences? Over 2,000 for the average user. So you would miss that post about your friend's baby being born, or the invitation to the Halloween party that I'm probably going to miss tonight. Right? So there are reasons for use of technology, for a scale business, to help people find information that's meaningful to them. This is not editing. This is help shaping people's preferences based on signals they give us, and then working with news organizations and editors for them to reach the broadest possible audiences in the world. It's not easy.
We respect that,
yeah.
Definitely. We would love to be in that problem situation, but we respect that. Espen?
Well, this is not for or against the algorithm. I use them myself, work a lot with it to make a more relevant experience. And we should learn from Facebook. The job you do on the technology side is fantastic. It's not about that. Then on the community side, I used to be responsible for a Norwegian community called Nettby that organized, I think, 90% of Norwegian teenagers. So you have my full sympathy that you need rules.
Yeah.
Else it ends in chaos, and it's not an environment where you can that is attractive for anyone. So it's not about that. Maybe you, by coincidence or mistake, became a publisher, a media company, the platform that is most important to transport news globally today. So that is where you, I think, do a poor job. As facilitating communities, you are fantastic. On technology side, making experiences for all of us, you are fantastic. But as a media company, you're fantastic. And yes, you are just turning 13 years now, but teenagers are growing up quickly these days. You grew by 220 million users in 12 months. So with that responsibility, with that sheer size comes responsibility. And I don't think Facebook fully is taking that responsibility today. And that is where I think the interesting discussion is.
Yeah, you gave a great quote from Bob Dylan. I'll give you my own Bob Dylan quote. The times they are changing, and it's a song I love. You know, as I said in this speech, you know, with every change, major change in technology over literally thousands of years, and the technological pace changes, people get concerned about what it means for the future when the ways that we're used to start to change. But I don't think at the same time we can say that more power in the hands of citizens, more access to information, much broader array of information at your fingertips is a bad thing. It just means that...
But no one disagree.
Yeah.
No one disagree.
But at the same time, you know, these tools that we create, these tools, as a technology company, we build tools that people use. They could literally allow anyone at any moment to send a picture of anything globally,
again,
instantaneously.
No,
and that is a prospect that, as a parent, I find quite frightening as well. And I think you all would appreciate that it's important that we have some sort of guidelines to protect people from material that can be harmful to them. And that is what we do. And in fact, it only works well when we do it together, because we're learning from you. We're learning from all of you. And we also have clear guidelines that actually treat both regular people and organizations, professional organizations, the same way. The guidelines apply to everybody. There's no VIP section for people who aren't going to get something taken down, right? They apply equally. And when there's a conflict, we can have conversations with big organizations to make sure there's no misunderstanding, and we do that. But we also want to make sure that we have a way to create an open balance and the possibility for a citizen journalist to emerge from anywhere and not give preferential treatment to others. Now that's an interesting discussion point. Perhaps we should have, you know, two types of ways in which we look at this. And that's something that I'm happy to hear ideas about. These are exactly the kind of conversations we want to have.
Yeah, thank you. Jan?
Yeah, I think it's important to say that it's not that Facebook are editing the online newspapers, right? So nothing happens on our sites when you retract this picture from your feed. And I also think it's important to point out that Facebook plays a role in distribution, but you're not disappearing by doing this. This is basically not my main concern. My objective is to publish quality stories and distribute them to people, as you are, and as you are. So I think we have to remember that we have about, on my sites, we have about 100 million visits a month, and some of the traffic are coming from Facebook. It's not stopping because you are retracting a picture from my feed or my friend's feeds. I don't like it, and I like and recognize the effort that Espen are doing for telling you it's wrong, but it's not stopping our newspapers. It changed nothing in our publishing. I think that's important to say.
It's grown your audience.
Excuse me?
It's grown your audience as well, I would imagine, to some extent.
Well, it could be.
Yeah.
Could be.
Jan, you have been one of the most progressive in the Norwegian ecosystem to be first in line to cooperate both with Google and Facebook. What is your experiences with how much that benefits your product and your business model to sustain journalism?
To distribute content via Facebook?
Yeah.
Yeah. For us, that's one of our distribution channels. Most traffic is direct. Some are from Google and some are from Facebook. Of course, we want to. I see it as an opportunity to reach people that doesn't go directly to our front page, to reach new audience. And of course, we are working a lot. We have a big team, 7 employees who are only working towards Facebook and writing stories that fits the Facebook user's profile. I think that's good for us. We learn what kind of stories they want and try to create quality stories. We didn't do the viral story site that all of our competitors did in 14, 15. So we learn a lot and we distribute it and we try to play with the users of Facebook's rules.
Yeah, and you can reach the Norwegian population outside of the country, but you do have a different challenge than, say, ITV or the Daily Mail or the Guardian, the Economist, that reach global audiences, English-speaking audience, and have blown open their following. Channel 4 News, which is a UK-based TV broadcaster, Channel 4 and ITN News now have, if you can believe it, 250 million views per month on Facebook, predominantly Facebook Live. And they were a domestic broadcast news organization because they captured the attention first with the Brexit debate, and then they've carried on doing great stuff using the tools. It's a different challenge. Now, sometimes you have breakaway, maybe viral hits like the Donald Trump hairpiece farm, which is a great video that, that traveled the world, or the Elvis, What Does the Fox Say, which on YouTube was the #1 trending video in 2013, but it is a different challenge for a unique language like Norwegian.
But what's more important for us, for instance, in Dagbladet, we see that opinion pieces, commentary pieces, important stuff are gaining a lot of traffic from Facebook, and that's positive for what we are trying to accomplish.
No, that's good.
I guess our problem in Norway is that we have a language that scales very badly because there's only a few million of us. So we can't adapt the BuzzFeed model of actually making money on that. And that's, I guess we have to talk about how do we actually fund independent journalism in the future and even make some profit for the owners.
But thank you, by the way, for doing all of this in English for my benefit.
We're doing our best.
I do appreciate that.
So, and I guess both Espen, Monica, and Jan, it is an issue here because what is the strategy behind actually building one platform for news, which might be a scenario that you become the primary platform for news, as you are in the US, as you are in several countries. There are like 50–60% of people saying they actually use Facebook as their primary news source.
As a source to discover news.
Yes, that's true. But that's kind of a way it's moving, and that competing with historically quite strong local news sites here in Norway, all living in a healthy ecosystem, funding quite nice sizes of journalists.
But the news they're accessing is news from the local newspapers, from the local broadcasters, from international broadcasters, from regional broadcasters, and they're accessing more information than ever before. And I think it'd be hard for anyone to say that you're getting less diverse information today than you had, say, 10 or 20 years ago. You actually have the access to your local information. And we see the numbers. We see the hundreds of thousands of video views that VG gets, right? We see how well some of these things perform in the country. So yeah, I mean, people are discovering news on Facebook because their friends want to talk about news, because more news organizations work with us to publish, because they find value. And no one is obligated, by the way, to put it on. But if it is a place for people to discover news, then of course we want to build that positive relationship. But I don't think that in a country like Norway it means less access to Norwegian news. In fact, I would think it probably means more access.
I guess the question is, would Facebook use its formidable resources to actually commit to finding sustainable business models for not only international, independent journalism, but local independent journalism? What would that take? And to make an example, Google has spent a lot of money in Europe, probably a bit of PR to get rid of the EU antitrust cases, but also working with news communities to actually try to figure that out. Are we, in the beginning heat of this, are we seeing more of that effort from Facebook's side, actually, investing money and technology on the ground here in Norway to actually figure that out?
Yeah, it's a good question. Let me just explain maybe 3 things that my team does, we spend time doing. Building audience. We help news organizations grow their audience by using our tools, by getting your pages verified, by learning how to use Instagram and Instagram stories, by learning how to take advantage of these tools to build an audience. And in fact, if you were to build the same audience through marketing, through spending of advertising money, it would probably cost you a lot of money. So there's a cost savings there to building audience on someone else's technology. The other thing we do is help monetize, and this is probably where we need to do more, for sure. And a lot of the feedback we get is how do we help those that are using our tools generate new ad revenue on things like instant articles, because you have more views perhaps on Facebook, but the yield is lower than advertising on your own website. So we're investing in ways like call to action to send people back to your own websites, introduce people to subscription opportunities on your own websites. And there's an enormous cost savings on I don't know if you know what it costs to set up a server and host millions of views of video simultaneously. It's quite expensive. And so you can use platforms and technologies to defer cost. And we're also seen as an outsourced product development team. We have partner engineers that can go in and help you integrate your insights from your tools to see how things are doing. So we see a lot of cost savings, particularly, and then we really want to work closer with you to generate real revenue in Norway with you. Our instant articles revenue, 100% of it goes back to the partners, actually. And that's how we do it today, because we know that that's important revenue for you.
Okay, thank you. I would like to zoom out for a second because I think Espen touched upon some very interesting stuff. He said if this continues, if the power of Facebook becomes even stronger, they will probably be regulated in one way or the other. Because if you were to be defined as a media company, you would probably be already. I guess that's one of the reasons why you're careful not to go into that space. So this is a question for you, Linda. What do you think will happen in Norwegian government or even in the EU if, and I must say, if Facebook continues to grow its power and actually being the platform, ruling all other platforms, defining kind of the relationship between the citizens and editors like Espen, Egil? Where do you think that will go? Where's the pain point of that?
I think it's difficult to say right now. And that's why I think it's important also with this dialogue, because we don't know where we are in next year or in 5 years. But I would like to say that I invited actually tomorrow I'm going to Copenhagen and I'm going to talk to my fellow Nordic media ministers, colleagues, and I will invite them to come to Norway next year in May, and also with all the Nordic editors and head of the big media houses to come together and talk about what we can do and to see the Nordic market or the Nordic society. We have to, as I said, I mentioned earlier, also to protect our small language and culture. And I hope this is just a start. I hope that we can also invite you, both Facebook and Google, in May next year, together with both the government and the biggest media houses to take this another step forward. But I would like to mention add one small point to what's been said, and it comes to the transparency and also the openness about which rules are used to allow or to remove or even ban expressions. Because I think one of the reasons that our Prime Minister was so shocked about what happened when she got off that airplane is that she didn't knew the rules, about your publication policy. She didn't know that what content could be removed. And I think you have a long way to go to inform and to tell us what is right and what is wrong. What are our rules? So if you can comment on that.
Yeah, and that's something we can do better. And we take no pleasure in taking down things and giving people stark messages about the removal of content. And we need to change the language, perhaps, the methods. But it's important that we do take down things immediately if we feel that they are contravening our community standards for very good reason, as we've discussed. So that feedback is actually really good. And also the fact that you're going to be gathering with people to discuss things, because we're going to have lots of different input from different parts of the world, and we want to make sure we're sensitive to specific cultural thoughts and ideas. But it is imperfect. It's hard, but I'd be curious, actually, because this is one example, and it's an example that's a pretty stark example of exactly where you come into conflict in keeping people safe and free expression. But are there other examples, maybe? I mean, we do this, like I said, a million times a day, and there are exceptions, and it'd be great to get your thoughts as well, because if there's other things we can do better based on a different example, because sometimes it's really unclear. I mean, things can get taken down for one reason, and you think it's one reason, but maybe there was music in the background, and that music was caught in our copyright protection rules, right? So any other thoughts you have and things we should be keeping an eye on would be great.
I'll give you a very clear example. Jan has some experiences been censored as well. If you can pull up the picture of that.
So maybe you can show
probably
the
talk on that.
So I think that's a good cue.
Yeah.
And you can see I was kicked out of Facebook twice. So this is the second time I was kicked out. This is from our women's site, kk.no. And this is from our cultural section in the newspaper.
Yeah.
Uploaded. You can see why it's censored, but this is actually...
I know it. And
Yeah,
I've
you know
lived in
that?
Japan for 6
Yeah,
years.
it's an exhibition in Tokyo that we are
Yeah.
writing about, and how that liberates the Japanese view on public art and their own history. And this was taken down without notice. All the people that was administrators in Dagbladet was kicked out of Facebook.
Right.
And the other one was, if you can take that back, this is a natural birth. This was a surprise for me because...
Is this a video or a photo?
This is a still photo.
Okay.
It's a series from where the photographer is taking pictures of the birth. Because you had an example, I think it was your colleague Nick Wren had an example that natural breastfeeding is allowed.
Yes.
That was specifically allowed on Facebook, but natural birth is obviously not allowed. And this is, as you can see, in the head's end of the birth. It's, for me, very safe picture.
Monica, would you like to add on to this?
Well, it's sort of in the same theme with Click. We don't publish like any heartbreaking news these days. So it's more in this theme of parenting and motherhood, where we've had several posts taken down, especially around breastfeeding and how you illustrate that.
Yeah.
But in our workings with Facebook, obviously over pretty much intense for the past year, we've come to find out how much nipple is actually allowed. If you put this and this much of the head in, we know we're within our boundaries. But that's sort of a side note, because the more important question is like the editorship that we feel being executed by Facebook, and especially in these. I do understand that these are scenes, especially even in the US. This is not like just a little bit of shocking in the Middle East. This is definitely a US a picture that would stir up something in the US.
Yeah.
But I think we as editors must be somehow able to express and illustrate our stories and the importance of them in the manner that we see fit for the respective publications.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is actually a beautiful photo, and the photo you had before of the Japanese art piece, which I'm familiar with. I lived in Tokyo for 6 years. Yeah. Very different cultural norms.
Yeah.
And that is actually a photo that perhaps, as we look at images of historical significance, cultural significance, it's exactly the kind of thing that we should be reviewing. As far as nudity, giving birth, these are things that do, and as you've experienced, go against our community standards. And the one thing you have to realize, though, it's not like we're trying to keep our standards from this appearing anywhere else on the internet. We have certain reasons. It's a 13+ site. 13+ site. I don't know about you guys, but I worked hard to keep my kids off Facebook until they were 13, and they probably had a secret, account somewhere. But you have to think about the audience, right? This isn't just you sharing amongst mature friends necessarily. And so, sorry, one more thing. But there is nothing keeping you from sharing these sorts of things, and even things more graphic if you like, by links to your own website. But you just have to think about the image you use to promote that link. So you can post it on your Facebook feed, and the link goes to your mobile web or anywhere else. There's nothing to keep you from linking off to things that you feel are important or that allow you to express that editorial freedom. But if they do contravene the policies, then the photo that represents it, and there are people that try and game that system all the time, trust me, needs to also be within the standards.
Yeah, I think this is a practical case level.
Yeah.
I think this is a good time to talk about the principles, because we have with us today Ola Sigvardsson. Ola, if you would join me on stage. Ola, I would say, is Swedish. He's the press ombudsman of Sweden. And he is representing an alliance of independent press councils of Europe. It's a network of 34 independent press councils. And he's here to deliver a letter, actually, to Facebook.
How are you?
Another letter to Facebook.
Very good, thanks.
After this,
And if you can get on
I feel
screen.
good.
still good.
Yeah, of course.
I'm not going to take... This is part of the core of the letter, Ola. It says that journalistic content that is already subject to a system of press ethics should not be edited or removed by Facebook. We wish that Facebook will commit itself to respecting the freedom of the press and ensure and formally guarantee that this will not happen in the future. And they want dialogue. So Oda, what can you say a little bit about how this letter became real and what is your expectations now?
Exactly. Just a few weeks back, we had a conference in our alliance in Stockholm, actually. We had 100 delegates from almost every country in Europe. And one of the topics we discussed was threats against freedom of the press and freedom of utterance. And we started off with discussing the situation in Turkey, and we discussed what's happening in Poland and in Hungary. And suddenly we were discussing Facebook as a threat to utterance and freedom of the press. I mean, in the frame of the picture we started this discussion with today, we were very concerned, actually appalled by what had happened. And we decided that we would like to have contact with Facebook and other social media in order to discuss how should we handle things like this. And from what I hear today, there is a dialogue rising and coming, and we would like to be part of that. And the idea that we put on the table from the Press Council of Europe is that journalism on Facebook and other social media that are monitored by press ethical systems with a code of ethics, with a system that take care of breaches, should not get the journalistic material removed or edited. And we would like to discuss this further with you.
Absolutely. No, thank you, and I knew you were coming, and I appreciate you bringing this. This is exactly the kind of input that we're looking for, and we'd be happy to discuss it with you further.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. But we should touch a bit about it, because you actually said in your speech that we will not kind of greenlight anyone, because that would be difficult to actually do around the world, because you say the press ethics is different in different parts. But for this region, at least, the principles are very much the same in all these different ethic councils. So I guess this kind of frames the dilemma.
Yeah.
Publishers, editors need Facebook to get reach, but they demand of you some kind of guarantee that they can actually do their job freely there. And you say that it's up to you guys whether you want to be on the platform or not, and this is our rules.
Yeah.
So I guess that this is kind of the dilemma, and I know, Espen, you also been struggling with this. I'd love to hear your perspectives, but would you like to say something more about this before?
Well, you know, it's an interesting question whether we should have, you know, two classes of people or more on Facebook. Should we treat news organizations differently than we treat normal people? Should we allow you more flexibility, even if it contravenes standards that are meant to protect people, than a citizen journalist or somebody who's not yet been verified, who maybe is reporting from the West Bank, a child, right, updating something or uploading something. So far we have one global community standard, and we try and work through where that does come into conflict. But I'm really curious to hear whether you do think that certain editors, to be defined, and that's the hard part, right, should have complete freedom to upload whatever they want to Facebook, whatever they want, right? It's a, you know, it's a really good discussion, actually. It's one of the things that I was curious to ask you. Or you.
Yeah.
Someone.
Would you like to elaborate?
Yeah.
I'll answer.
Yeah, great.
Well, obviously, all the way back in, I guess, at the London meeting, I don't think you were there yet, probably, but when there were quite a few editors that went to London to discuss a few things, and among the issues we raised then was, what about verified pages? Is there any opportunity that certain publications or with certain standards can have verified pages? And I understand the dilemma that brings about. Obviously, like you said, there are news organizations all over the world that has a completely different standard than what we do. But at the same time, like the harsh reactions that Aftenposten had with the threats of like being shut down and so forth, there should be a standard on which one possibly responds or respond to maybe a select or a verified account or any such thing. I'm not saying that we can have a green light. I understand that we don't. I would never give anybody a green light on my own side. But isn't there a way that there would be a different discussion with a select or an editor or a publicist or some form of like different standards than just the private account?
I mean, again, it's something that it's one of the very topics that we are open to consider. And as I said in the speech, you pointed out, you know, how do you define editor? How do you find where that line is between freedom of speech and hate? Right? And what countries do we limit this to? Do we say this doesn't apply in certain countries where maybe you think that what they say is offensive to you, right? And so it's exactly the right question. The answer is still to be determined, and it's somewhere in there, right? Right now what we have are the standards, and we have a way in which we review based on dialogue, based on context, and a moment in time as well. Which you think is working pretty well, because the other examples you've given me are, Japanese erotica and a birth photo, which I can understand why some people would think it should stay there. But I think on the whole, and it's not perfect. We do a pretty good job of getting it right most of the time for freedom of expression, and it's important as well. And it's interesting to note when things happen like the attempted coup in Turkey. Did any of you go and look at the live Facebook video map? It was phenomenal. It was amazing. There were blue dots, and you can look at this on Facebook, going live from all over the country. And actually, the Prime Minister went and used a mobile phone and FaceTime to go via a broadcast. I mean, the integration of social and telling the story, and as a journalist, seeing and tapping into this information from everywhere in an unimpeded way was extremely important for people to also understand that the people were very much in support of the Prime Minister at that time, as people were out in the streets everywhere around the country. And you may have a different point of view, but empowering people to have a similar power to broadcast as the Prime Minister himself was actually critical. And so we're really talking about exceptions here, right? Very rare exceptions in some cases. And we need to find a way to be quick and be reasonable with the most amount of people most of the time when those things come up. But this letter, that dialogue, that conversation is what will help us make us better. We have a big poster at Facebook that says we're only 1% finished. And that's how we go to work every day. We're looking at this thing saying, okay, it's
and
true.
all the rest of us get a bit scared when you say that.
Just feel like we've got a lot of work to do. I mean,
okay, I'll give the word to Espen now, and after that I'll open up for questions from the room. So please be prepared with your name and what you want to ask any of us on stage. Espen, and then Linda.
I think most of this discussion is just where Facebook loves it to be, about rules, about nudity, about the necessity for rules which everyone will support and understands. I think that is a really small issue. Again, this was a symbol, an important symbol, but a symbol. It's about securing institutions, necessary institutions in a democracy. The press is one of them, but not the only one. And again, the sheer size of Facebook and how it controls what information ends up where. Turkey, yes. What ends up in my feed, what doesn't, and so on. And I think actually we all have roles here. Facebook, I predict you will change. The signals you have given today and last week is really important. I think you will change much more radically, because I think long time ago you understood it. You just don't know how to handle it, and it is difficult. So I predict you will.
I have to say, Espen, I mean, we've been around for 12 years. It's not a long time in the grand scheme of things, but we are constantly reviewing our policies. It didn't start here.
I know, and you're changing.
It was a big story that we appreciated the input on, right? But there are lots of changes that you were not responsible for, that lots of people around the world, right, were flagging us constantly. People are constantly challenging us to think about this deeply, and it's an ongoing process. The amount of change that takes place, not just in technology, but the amount of things that we see, and believe me, you don't want to see some of the things that we see.
No.
You do not ever want to see that stuff. And I've unfortunately had the opportunity to see this stuff that does get blocked. It's not pleasant, right?
Again, we all agree.
But we do respect that point of view completely. We provide tools, and we help empower people and organizations to reach audiences, to generate revenue, and to use technology tools. And that's what we're here to do. So this is all, great discussion, and I'm glad to be here. I think that we can learn a lot from the news organizations. And this is exactly what I'm
Espen
here
would
more
like to
about.
finish.
I'll just to follow.
Sure, go for it.
We don't disagree on this.
I don't think we actually do disagree.
We don't disagree on this.
Yeah.
However, I think the concern about securing necessary democratic institutions is there, and I predict you will change quite radically in the years to come. I think you, representing the politicians, probably the EU Parliament will be the first to move. It's a little bit more complicated for US Congress because the two main players here, Google and Facebook, are both American, and it's a fantastic business for the US. It makes it a little bit more complicated, but seeing the tradition of the US Congress and their ability to do what is necessary to protect democracy, I think they also US Congress will move. Then we have a responsibility
It's interesting,
as a society to create alternatives. We have to learn from Facebook and create independent platforms that better secure our independence. Not that is isolated from the world, being Facebook or Google, but that is more even, that is more balanced. And we didn't do that. We sat on each our turf and never worked together on this technology side, the platform side. And we should learn very fast from that.
Yeah.
Thank
I was just going to say that every single member of Congress in the US has a Facebook account. And the youngest member of Congress actually uses it to post the justification for every single vote she makes. That never happened before. Right? These tools are very powerful, and it's happening in more countries. We agree that we need to work together. But a lot of the stuff we're doing is actually, today, this very moment, helping improve people's ability to choose the governments they want. We actually, for the very first time, linked directly to the US voter registration site. We ran a campaign for everyone over 18. We've been supporting, go out and vote campaigns for a while, but we did this year. And we had over 2 million people, additional people, registered to vote. And California, the state of California announced that they had over 200,000 people register that day, just based on the work that we did. And so, these are tools. It depends how you use the tool. The tool itself is neutral, right?
But I guess this is exactly the point, because we are aware how powerful the tools are. And of course, being able to determine what information people see, you could probably change the course of the election in the US. And even though we probably would want you to do that, that would be deeply disturbing, even though you could, stop Trump from winning. So I guess that's the question of the accumulated power that's there. And I guess Espen's point is that you're moving into that space, whether you like it or not. And I'm sure that
the
might
space
be a
where more
political
information can be shared more freely, more quickly, with more people. Keep in mind, at least when I was born, I'll turn 50 next year, there was one newspaper that showed up at my door, the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, which no longer exists, unfortunately. There were 4 TV stations. There was no remote control. I was remote control. My dad would say, go turn the channel, right? There were 3 news broadcast networks, all pretty much reporting the same thing, maybe with a slightly different editorial point of view. This is good for democracy. It's good for freedom of expression. It empowers people. And like every technology in the past, it empowers people more. People also, naturally, and traditional businesses and traditional models get disrupted and concerned. But it's very, very similar to things we've seen in the past. Now, it's tough, right? It's hard.
No, that's not tough.
Yeah?
That's progress.
Yeah, and the things you need to be thinking, yeah,
no,
it is progress.
I haven't heard one voice saying that's tough.
Yeah, I was looking at there was a medical journal from 1850 that said we shouldn't have public education. This is a very respected medical journal because it will create harmful information and information overload in children. Look, at every change where people are more empowered, it's a bit scary. The other things you should be thinking about from a business perspective are you doing the right things to account for these major trends? Things going to mobile. Facebook didn't invent that. Things going to video, right? That's happening anyway. Things going global and instantaneously shared. These are things that happen irregardless of the Facebook's existence, right? These things occur, and so there's a lot of work that needs to happen in every organization to prepare themselves for these changes.
Great.
Yep.
I promise to open up for comments from the room. I really appreciate you guys turning up the volume, so we're going to keep it going. But I have a question from behind there. Can you please present yourself?
My name is Kjersti Løken Stavrum. I'm the Secretary General of the Norwegian Press Association.
Hi.
Hi. And I think it's about time when it comes to the question of Facebook being an editor to take the duck test. I mean, if you walk like a duck, swim like a duck, and quakes like a duck, you are probably an editor. And so I think we're there now. The really scary thing about this episode here in Norway is that it took us so long time. We had to use so much force to take care of this historic picture for the Norwegian audience, for the world audience. I found that really, really scaring. And all the time I was thinking, what takes Facebook so long? Mm-hmm. And I hear you say, you said twice, that you have removed this picture before. Mm-hmm. I hear that you talk about the safety for your audience, but I don't hear any concern that you are removing important material from them, which this case is all about. So my question those days, I now have the unique opportunity, because we are so impressed that you are alive, that you can communicate. What took you so long? Was that acting according to those standards that you put up to the rest of us?
Good question. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, this is exactly the reason why we announced the changes on October 21st. That we're going to improve the process, that we're going to improve the speed, we're going to improve the communication with organizations when they occur. Because there were two things that happened. One was the takedown. And if it was never allowed back up, we'd be having a very different conversation. But we did put it back up because we realized it was wrong, right? And it took time. And so one was the takedown. The second thing was the way in which it was communicated, which is something that we also learned we need to improve, right? As you raised. So we're going to work with journalists, we're going to work with publishers and organizations to figure out exactly the answer to your question, how to do it better. But I think we all agree that it being put up was the right thing to do. I think we can disagree on how the process worked between the initial post and what happened. But this is exactly the hard stuff that we're trying to figure out. And your input is going to be really useful. In fact, we have a workshop tomorrow for 2 hours where you're all welcome to come, and we're going to tell you about some of our tools, but also we want to have more of this feedback. Thank you for the question.
There's a question right here.
Hello, my name is Gladys Fouché. I'm a reporter from Reuters.
Hi.
Hi. My question is to you, Mr. Walker.
Can you please speak a bit louder?
Can you talk us through the process from the moment the picture was taken down, the decision-making process within Facebook? Who took the decision to restore the picture, and how did it go, the escalation of taking the picture back up? And I'm particularly interested, for instance, how quickly was this escalated to the group of Sheryl Sandberg, Justin Osofsky, Monica Bickett, Joel Kaplan, and Elliot Rage, please?
Okay. How much time have we got?
We'll just keep it going.
No, thank you for the question. Look, photos are reported, as I said, millions of times every day. There are people that report these photos all over the world. They're a team of experts that are trained from multiple backgrounds, speak over 40 languages, and they do what's right based on our community guidelines. When there is an issue, then we do have a team of experts that gather, and the team that gets involved does depend on where the challenge to the community standard comes from. So it can be a very different, diverse group of people that actually discuss that. And then we try and act as quickly as we can to respond. So there is no specific answer to your question. We have our ways of doing it, but it does change every time. And the executives trust the process. And this is what we have to do every single day.
My question is then, is there somebody, who is the person who says, okay, guys, we need to take another look here? Is it somebody who sits Is, you know, the Nordics? Is it you? Is it somebody else in London? I mean, who is this person?
It's a combination of people.
Can you
And
give
in
us
some cases, it might include myself. There are other people in our policy team who are based in the Middle East, depending on where it comes up, right? There are people who are experts in this. There are people who are considering many different things from a multiple point of view. But the number one concern is keeping people safe, right? And doing it now as quickly as we can, as best we can.
So were you part of the decision? Were you involved in discussions?
I was giving you an example of how it works if something were to come up from this particular area. I'm not going to answer that specifically. It was interesting, actually, because somebody had said in a report that the people behind it had the cultural sensitivity of a cabbage. We do think about this more deeply than a lot of people, I think, give us credit for, or lack of credit for. It's hard. My job in being responsible for media organizations is to have a conversation with media organizations, maybe one that it might involve going forward. So it depends, is the answer.
I totally understand, and thank you for that. But I'd
Thank
like to
you.
understand
I think we need
one
to-
more.
to
No,
leave-
it's how
I'm
long
sorry.
before it went up all the way to head office and Facebook? You know, before Sheryl Sandberg was involved, before the group of 5 people at Facebook who make the final decisions on this were involved. Can you talk us through a bit more step
In
by
every
step?
circumstance, we have the same process by all the people whose job it is to make sure that we keep people safe and use our community standards. And the way it might be escalated, if there is a conflict, it depends.
I think you need to
Thank
continue
you.
this interview afterwards. Sounds very interesting. There's one more question over here.
Yes, my name is Ole Jakobsunde. I'm the chairman of Schibsted, and I'm also part of the board of The Guardian. Thank you for your introduction to Facebook. I've always been a great admirer, and I've learned a lot about digital disruption by you. My role in this, I guess, is to make sure that we have any institutions in the future in order to produce any of the great content that you like. So my question is more along these lines. According to the projections that we see at Schibsted, you will dominate, together with Google, the digital advertised scene of Norway next year. You will have about 85% of the digital advertising revenues. And this is because it's been created a dependency between the news organizations and Google and Facebook. Now, the difficulty then is that because you're such an enormous distribution platform, you also have a very, very good knowledge of the Norwegian user. And you take this information and form it into advertising sets that is very powerful in the programmatic trading that's coming up. So my question to you is then really, it's very good to hear about your new openness to the content, but I don't see how that is enough for us to have good news organizations in the future.
Well, thank you for raising that. And you know, you are a very important partner to us, and the work that you do is critical in this market, and the impact you have also beyond the region. As I mentioned, you know, the trends it's a seismic shift. People think about it as a revolution, but this stuff has been happening for decades, right? A lot of the changes that you're experiencing have been happening literally for decades, right? In the news industry, in publishing, subscriptions, physical to digital. And I know it's hard as well. I really appreciate that it's hard, which is why we're spending a lot more time investing in our teams and our partner engineering teams, and we need to spend more time with your organization and with others like yours. And because we also appreciate that the commercial models have been challenged, we want to find new ways to help build audience and generate more revenue, and as I mentioned before, also save you a lot of costs, if you'd like it, on using our tools to innovate with new technology, because it's very expensive to develop things like virtual reality. and we can help put that in your hands, in the hands of your journalists and people to try and learn how to tell new stories, because this change is coming. It's not a completely satisfactory answer. I think there needs to be a lot of work in the industry itself to drive themselves forward and learn how to capture new opportunities. You know, and our partnership, I think, will be better than not working together in terms of giving us information on how to better serve you, and you tools that might better serve your audiences. But there has to be a lot of that self-drive. Now, there is a shift. There is a shift of ad spend from TV and other sources into online, into digital. It's still a very small percentage, particularly when you're looking at TV spend. It is all to play for. It is to play for by you. It is to play for by you. It is to play for by your colleagues. Modern Times Group, MTGX, they've been developing a very forward-looking digital investment arm that's going after new types of businesses, new types of ventures, acquiring young startups, as I'm sure many of you are as well. So, you know, this is a very fluid situation. And so there are a lot of things that you can do yourselves, of course. But from our part, help you grow audience, help you monetize better, and introduce you to new technologies that hopefully you and your audience will benefit from.
Last question from the room.
Yes, thank you. My name is Kim. I run a small local newspaper, but I'm very interested in the US elections.
Okay.
And I appreciate the fact now that you talk about diversity, which is great. The diversity gives me access to all these different news outlets, even persons that can give me access to this. But the diversity is so big. That's why this filter that you present comes in. And if I was to believe my Facebook feed, Bernie Sanders should be president.
Very what?
Bernie Sanders should be the president, if I was to read my Facebook feed. Because all my friends support him. Mm-hmm. So that's the perception I get. So even if the tool is neutral, like you said, mm-hmm. that's not the perception it gives me. And I would imagine it would be the same if you were living in West Virginia. All your friends are Trump supporters. What you get out of that is a whole different perception. Mm-hmm. And that's a problem, and not been addressed here. How do you deal with that? I think even if it is a lot of diversity, the situation with having Facebook as your news feed will create less diversion, because you will live in a different world from where I live in or in West Virginia. And how do you deal with that?
I'm glad you raised that. That's I think the filter bubble or the echo chamber question that we get a lot, and actually it's a really good question. We fundamentally actually think it's untrue. We all have a psychological bias, and that's how we choose our friends, that's how we choose the newspapers that we want to read, that's how we pick the TV shows. We tend to gravitate towards things that tell us what we want to hear. But how many of you have on Facebook have a friend in another country? Okay. How many of you have a friend who's a different religion than you? Different political point of view? Okay, it's more than half of you, right? How many of you have ever unfriended somebody or stopped their comments coming because you thought it was maybe too much, no matter what it was, right? How many of you liked a page from a newspaper that you really like and unliked a page that you're just tired of hearing about, right? You are giving signals to us every day to help determine the shape of the information you receive on the newsfeed, which is only one of many sources of information, but increasingly it's becoming, of course, important. But if you think about your Facebook community of friends, you personally, compared to the ones that you interact with daily, the daily ones, we call them strong ties. Family, friends, people you see at work every day. These are people that are more likely, perhaps, to share a similar point of view, even though I've been debating with my brother on the election, completely different points of view. He just told me his insurance premiums are going to go up 33% in Washington State. So it depends on the person, but generally speaking, your close ties might have a much closer point of view. Then there are the weak ties. And most people in Europe have over 50 friends in other countries. This is the average that we've come up with, like many of you indicated. And the weak ties are people that you see maybe once every 10 or 20 years, people went to high school with, and they will definitely have a much, much, much broader point of view. And I would imagine you've seen some of their posts on Facebook that perhaps are different than your own point of view. And then what you choose to do with that will differ. So compared to what you see in your normal life, compared to historical access to information and diversity that you may not have ever received in the past, compared to what you find on a platform like Facebook, we feel that there's much, much more access to diverse points of view. on the platform. And with regard to the US elections, we actually have understood that it's about 50-50 on Facebook that are Republican, or leaning Republican and leaning Democrat. So there is no particular leaning, nor do we support any particular point of view. We're just there to help people share what's important to them.
Thank you. I'm going to allow a comment from you, Linda, and then the last question from Harald Stanghelle, who is part of the invitation to this session. So, please.
Very, very short.
Yeah.
I think the initiative from Sweden is it's a great initiative, and I wonder if you could, when we had this Nordic Media Summit in May, with all the Nordic ministers of media and also the representatives from the Nordic media institutions. I wonder if you could come and answer on this challenge in May. I know...
Next May?
No, May 2017.
Yeah.
Because I think we could have also, it could be our next step, and we could have a great discussion on this.
Yeah.
And I think it will put us one step forward. And as a representative from the government, I think it's important for me that the audience, the market, and also the media itself is the one also making the new policies or regulation, and it's not just the politicians making all the new legislative.
Yeah, well, thank you for the invitation. I'd love to join if I can.
Thank you. Harald Stanghelle, would you like to ask the last question?
Yes, my name is Harald Stanghelle. I'm one of Espen's editors and
Hi.
also leader of the Norwegian Association of Editors. It has been a lot of talks about nudity in this debate. I want to talk about politics.
Okay.
2 concrete examples. First, according to the trustworthy news agency AP, the Israeli Minister of Justice said that from May to August this year, the Israeli government complained to Facebook 158 times about what they call rioting content. 95% of the complaints was accepted by Facebook. Second example, the Norwegian Committee of Solidarity for the Kurds this autumn tried to arrange a demonstration to support the Kurds. They mentioned PKK and its former leader Öcalan in the invitation at Facebook. And what happened? This post was taken down by Facebook. It's a very, very old lesson that one part's freedom fighter in another part is another part's terrorist. We also know that you have a dialogue with different governments, like a Turkish government and the Israeli government. But isn't this political censorship, the example I mentioned, from a media company?
Thanks for the question. We have conversations with policymakers, with culture ministers, prime ministers. I was just in Lagos, Nigeria as well. We met with content creators, developers, people in government, and this is very common practice for us. There are a number of different forces at play, and a lot of different governments and a lot of different people are constantly working to try to influence. This is also a very, very good reason why we have our community standards, which are published, right? That we need to make sure that we have those guidelines, and we're trying to create as much open dialogue and protection of freedom of expression as we possibly can. Now, I can't comment on those 2 specific cases because I wasn't involved in them, but I will also state that there is a lot more asked of us to be removed than we do remove, and it's very, very hard to make organizations happy. It's extremely difficult, and we have to balance that out. And so we need to go and spend time in different places. In this month alone, to meet with partners. I'm here today. I'm in Holland on Monday. I'm in Turkey. I'm going to Egypt. I'm going to Tel Aviv. I'm going as well to, where? I forgot at this point. Somewhere else. I think it's another country. To meet with content creators, to young social media stars, to meet with news organizations, to have news. I'm going to Berlin and Paris. I forgot those two, sorry. To make sure that we listen to as many people as possible and try and get it right. I think there may be exceptions we could spend the entire day trying to find answers to, but the principles are what matters. People safety, balanced with protection of the broadest form of freedom of speech that we can protect. And that's what we're dealing with. It's interesting, actually, as a journalist, I did lots of different training, and I didn't realize coming here the most useful training was the battlefield first aid and hostile environments training courses that I went through. It's been a real pleasure to answer these questions, and I want to keep up the dialogue. We have a project tomorrow where you can come and join us, and tomorrow is really to learn about the tools and give us specific constructive feedback, which is what I hope we continue to get from you.
Yes, and I would like to thank you all for taking part of the conversation. I think we all can agree from Espen all through the line, this is probably only the beginning of this discussion. So let's continue.
Thank you.
Good to have you here, Patrick. You are now relieved for a small break and meet up here at 3 o'clock. Thank you very much. Give the panel a big applause.
Thank you very much.